Item 5, Reports and Updates. 5A, GSD Financial Series 6. Sarah Viera is with us again this evening, CESA 1, and we are on grants this evening. Thank you. It's all yours.
Tonight, we're in our next series, which is focused all around grants. I'm just reminding you of the partnership agreement that we have. So tonight we are reviewing district grants. I pulled out some surrounding districts to compare that to and just kind of go through each grant and really talk at a high level of how those funds can be utilized. And it was a great segue. You heard a little bit about Title II and how your district is already utilizing those funds. And we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight too. I will be back in May for my last presentation around student membership counts and vouchers and open enrollment. So grants do serve a purpose. They are in place for several reasons. So they can definitely help to expand opportunities that we have for our students. You'll pick up on this. We talk through some of the grants that we'll review tonight. They are in place to support some targeted student populations. They give flexibility to pilot programs, some innovative programs. It can really work to provide services beyond what the core funding is that school districts receive. Grants are typically pretty restricted in the use of funds. So when we do get grant dollars, they are for a very specific reason. We'll talk about some of the monitoring that districts have in place to make sure that we are using them appropriately. Okay, so there are two types of grants, and I admired and acquired this from a DPI presentation. So there are two types. There's a formula and competitive. So a formula grant is awarded on a non-competitive basis, and the amount of the allocation is based on a calculation that's set by the state through state statute. So when we think about our title funding or our IDEA fund, those are formula based. On the other side, we have competitive. So those are grants that we're actually, as a district, applying for. We're being ranked against other applicants and scored to determine if we receive funding. If we do receive funding, are we receiving the full amount we're asking for, or did we maybe not score highly in all of our areas so where they're backing off the full amount that we could? A really good example of a competitive type grant would have been a few years ago when the Department of Justice did the school safety grants. That was considered a competitive grant. So when we think about Germantown's grant portfolio, so what you have available, and I sat down here and said to Brittany, one thing that I wish I would have, I thought about it today, what I wish I would have put in this presentation, and I'm happy to share the information as a follow-up, is the private school set-aside that comes along with our federal grants. So on the federal side, we have Title I, II, III, and IV. And then we have, and under those title grants, those qualify for that private school set aside. So what that means is from the title funds that the district gets, so the district gets the entire amount of the allocation, but then the public school district is required to then sit down and meet with the private school and do a meet and confer, do a needs assessment to determine how much so when the allocation comes through, how the private school intends to use those dollars, because it ultimately does come back on the district to make sure that those funds are being used appropriately. So there's a full calculation that the Department of Public Instruction uses for each of the title grants to determine how much does get set aside for public schools, and that's very common with federal grants.
Sorry, Sarah, to interrupt. Jake, this is important for the board as well as those viewing to understand how we are allocated money from these title grants. However, we are doing the work. So Jake, if you could please speak to, given the example of Title I, the dollar amount roughly that we receive as school district, but then what your work is to allocate that money and make sure that money is taken care of by our public or private school entities, and how our workforce engages in that.
Thanks, Dr. Reuter.
You're welcome.
For Title I, the school district of Germantown receives a little over $100,000 that's allocated for that. On our side of things, we use Title I funds to support students, specifically through our multi-tiered systems of support. So students who are accessing additional supports if they are struggling in reading or math. The vast majority of our title funds goes to supporting FTE in those positions to support children. When we talk about how we support the private schools, there is a private school set-aside piece that all of our private schools also receive title. Actually, only one of our schools elected to receive Title I funds this year, but they also receive Title II and Title IV allocations, and we help manage that for all of the private schools that reside within the Germantown School District. So we work with the principals of those schools, and then they need to purchase things through us. So we purchase it for them, and then we send those resources to those schools depending on how they want to allocate those funds. I support those schools in making sure that they are accessing the funds in an appropriate way. So I provide guidance as to what the funds can and cannot be used for, as well as make suggestions to them as to how to allocate their resources.
Thank you. Mrs. Cole, who's not here right now, but it's the same process for IDEA funds as well. So I just want the board to be aware that our people are doing the work to allocate these funds and work with our private entities of their dollar amount that is resourced out of these different grants. Thank you, Mr. Miziak. Sorry, Sarah.
So as Mr. Miziak stated, we do make all the purchases. So we get the revenue in and we make all the purchases. So the dollar amounts that might be listed in her presentation later aren't necessarily all our dollar amount.
Right.
So we're spending the money, but we're not getting the product.
And we're doing the work for the private entities.
Correct.
I think
Mr.
that-
Ewert,
oh, sorry.
sorry.
That was going to be my question. If we're funding the resource employee work time, our knowledge for private education to expend these dollars, but we're not reimbursed for that labor.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but we time and effort report for certain services that our employees are obligated to do under these grants, but the actual clerical work we're not servicing. We're not time and effort reporting that.
Okay. So it's not as clear cut as
I'm sorry.
it's not that clear cut.
Correct.
As far as okay.
We do time and effort reporting to provide how much time we spend on it, but it's not like we get additional dollars
Right.
later because of that time, if that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
But we don't. It's just for the reporting purposes to say that this is how much work we are doing in these grants. If you have an employee that does get paid out of a grant and not out of a grant, that's why they have to do time and effort reporting to show that if we are reporting that they are doing 50% of their job out of a grant and 50% not out of a grant, they have to be able to report to the state what work they're doing to show that 50% of their salary can get paid out of the grant. So it doesn't have necessarily anything to do with how much the private schools get and we get. It's just an accounting to make sure that we're accounting for people correctly.
Yeah, you're not invoicing anybody for that time and effort.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
I only bring that up. Sorry to derail you, Sarah,
Okay.
but that's not understood, I think, by the general public when it comes to grants and our fiduciary responsibility to private schools.
We ran into some of this with the busing issues.
Yep. Case in point, yesterday we called a snow day. Jake's text message for me was contact our private schools because they run on our same bus line. They run through our same scope and sequence. And Jake is the caveat to our private schools to let them know we're canceling school. So therefore they cancel school. So I think the reason I bring this up outside of the grant thing is the public entity of us as a school district has a lot of responsibility to the private entity that the general public does not necessarily understand.
Thank you.
I do have one thing to add in regards to transportation. If we do call school and they don't call school, we still have to transport them.
Sorry, Sarah.
Oh no, this is all good. We want to get the right information out, so
Yeah.
this is perfect. And one thing that I did hear, and I apologize, I don't remember his name, Jake.
Jake.
So one thing that Jake did mention was that he said that one of the schools turned down the title funds. They have that right. So if they determine that they don't want any funding from the district or from the state, federal level, that is their choice. You could see that happen. Okay, so we have the title funds. We also have IDEA flow through and IDEA preschool. IDEA is just the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's what that stands for. Also on the federal side, we have the Perkins Career and Technical Education Grant. And I did put on here the National School Lunch Program as well, because that is a pretty robust program. And then on the state and local side, I will go over educator effectiveness and then the robotics grant. In total, so looking at the entire state of Wisconsin in 24-25, the Department of Public Instruction awarded over $562 million in federal education grants. So these are the formula grants like Title I, ID8 flow through, Carl Perkins. It does include some competitive grants that that not every district has access to or didn't apply for. It does not include National School Lunch Program. I'm thinking this is the slide that I want to update and be able to show. So this is the whole allocation, but this is the amount that's going to the private school. When I have the ability to do that, probably tomorrow, I will update it just because I think it's good information. So this is a summary of the federal funding for the Germantown School District. So you can see by grant what your allocation is. The federal funding in your case is providing funding for school meals, special education services, mental health supports, career support, and then professional learning for our educators. When we look at the amount that is allocated, it really does make up a relatively small amount of the entire budget. However, how the district chooses to utilize those funds and apply those funds, especially in the area of special education, can be a lifesaver when it comes to the budget. So small amount, but being strategic with these is very important.
I would just add that there's been comments made with social media groups that we continue to cut special education services, which isn't true. As you can see here, there's over $800,000, almost $900,000 in grant money that goes directly to special education services.
So then there are two types of awards for school districts. So there's a direct grant program, which there aren't too many of these. The school district doesn't have either of these. But then on the state administered programs, that's how most of federal grants are received. So essentially, like your Title 1, 2, 3, 4, your IDEA, Carl Perkins, the Career and Technical Education grants, they are awarded to the state of Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, and then we become sub-recipients as school districts. So then it's given out to districts based on enrollment, free and reduced lunch populations, things of that nature. They're given out in different ways. This is another admired and acquired slide from DPI, but I think it really kind of lays out the process for federal grants pretty well, and so how they funnel through. And so a few months ago, when districts were concerned about potentially not getting federal dollars, right, passed on. So this is kind of the process that's going through. So the first step is it has to be authorized through some type of legislation. So the biggest one, or the ones that are, I think, most familiar to people are the ESSA. So Every Student Succeeds Act, the CARES Act that gave out dollars during COVID, IDEA back in 2004. So once those things are authorized in legislation, then the appropriations have to be determined. And so those appropriations, hopefully, once they're signed by the sitting president, reflect what was authorized in the law. They usually come pretty close, but there could be changes. And then it goes through the award process. So how are those funds getting given out to those that are qualified for those grants? What kind of process? Are we going to do a direct grant, or is it a sub-grant? Is it a formula, or is it competitive? So every federal grant or any pot of money that is determined for a federal grant is going to go through this process. And then the last and most important step of the federal grant process is that accountability piece. Once those funds are given out, how is it being determined and tracked that those funds really are supporting the goals of that federal program and following the regulations that are in place? Yep, go ahead.
Hey, back one slide, please. Under awards at the bottom, there are types of grants, formula, or competitive. What's the difference between those two items?
Yeah. So if you go back to, we have a slide for that. So the formula grant, those are given out based on your student enrollment or your free and reduced population. There's some type of calculation behind why the amount that you're getting. Competitive, you're applying for it and you're being compared, your application is being compared to others that are applying for the same grant.
So an example would be when Jake was speaking to Title I, it's based on our formula of percent of students that are free and reduced lunch within our school district. But when we've had mental health grants that Brittany's brought forward or Katie's brought forward, that's a competitive grant that we've applied for.
Okay.
So that's the difference in the two.
Yeah, so in a competitive grant, there might be a max dollar amount that you can get. And then maybe you met all requirements of the application, you get the max amount, or maybe you scored an 8 out of 10 in one section, and then they back off on the amount that they give you. So there's a set pot of money. It depending on how many people apply for it, who applies for it, how they do in their application depends on how much your district could potentially get.
Okay, thank you. When the terms came up again, I was looking at it saying, what is that again? So
All good.
thanks.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, do the funds then for the competitive grants, does that get split up with the private schools also, or is it just a formula grant?
With the competitive grants, I don't believe there is any allocation because the ESSER wasn't considered. ESSER or CARES Act wasn't considered competitive. So if a private school wanted that money, they would need to
Apply on that.
yeah,
Apply.
they have when I mentioned the safety grant through the Department of Justice, they had a private school had the same ability to apply for that as a public school did.
And then with the formula grants, then is there a certain percentage that has to go? Is it based on per student? And then what happens to the funds that if a school says we don't want that, does that go back to the public school system then? And they can use it however.
It's a percentage based. There's a calculation. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it is based on a calculation to determine how much is set aside. It could be based on the number of students with special needs that are at the private school. There's a few other things that are within that calculation. I'll be sure to include that too, because that's all out there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so when we think about federal grant accountability, so there are a few areas that we have to focus on. So the first one is the Uniform Grant Guidance, sometimes endearingly referred to as UG. There is a lot within it, but 3 things that I would call out within the Uniform Grant Guidance, why that's in place. And a few years ago, districts were required to actually put together a major manual around uniform grant guidance. So I'm sure there is a binder on one of Brittany's bookshelves in her office. So 3 major areas I would call out in the UG is it really focuses around cost principles. So making sure that procedure book is defining what's allowable from a purchasing perspective, what's reasonable, and what is allocable from a cost perspective for federal funds. It also lays out audit requirements. So I think the first night I was here, the auditor was also here. You may have heard him talk about the single audit. So the Uniform Grant Guidance lays out and establishes requirements for the single audits. Right now, you can single audit any program that's over $750,000. So I don't know what yours was this year, but the UG lays out the requirements for that single audit piece. The last thing that I would call out around UG is procurement procedures. So how you're actually procuring and bringing in supplies and costs and how you're utilizing your federal funds, making sure that you have procedures laid out and in place so that if there are ever any questions about it, you have something to refer to. The second is EDGAR. EDGAR stands for the Educational Department General Administrative Regulations, and that's exactly what it is. It's all about regulations, making sure that districts are using funds responsibly. So making sure that there are appropriate internal controls in place, making sure that you have processes to ensure that expenses are necessary and reasonable when it comes to the use of federal funds. So a lot of guardrails in place to make sure that districts are doing what they need to do. Along those same lines, there are many federal program statutes. So when you think about 3 in particular, the ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, IDEA, and Perkins, all of those have statutes in place that we as districts have to follow. And again, it really is just enforcing districts to demonstrate that we are using funds correctly, that what we're purchasing is allowed under federal regulations. Documenting, right? We just talked about time and effort reporting. So how are we documenting staff time? And then how are we monitoring and making sure that our information is audited appropriately? So a lot of checks and balances in place when it comes to the use of federal funds. So now transitioning into the title. So we'll go through the title series and just kind of go high level of what each of these are for. So Title I is all about academic support, and it is support specifically for students that are in low income households. So you may only have one school within your school district that qualifies as a Title I school. You may have no schools that qualify for a Title I. And you could have a school that qualifies one year and not the next. It's all based on within that school what the free and reduced lunch status percentage is. And that typically is to qualify for Title I, that school population has to have a free and reduced population of 40% or more. The funds under Title I are used for in-school reading and math interventions. It can be used to fund instructional staff. It can be used to implement student support programs, and it can also be used for parent engagement activities, which we do see a lot of in other school districts. How do we how do we get those families to engage more and stay involved with their students? Because the thought is if the parent is engaged, then the student will be more successful as they go throughout their academic career. Title II is all based on supporting our teachers and building up our teachers and principals, developing them to be better educators. The funds can be used for anything from professional development, instructional coaching. Maybe at the district level, there's some initiatives that are wanted around teacher retention. The whole idea behind this is that if we can support teachers and principals and develop them really well, that's going to increase student achievement and ultimately close student achievement gaps. That's what Title II is focused on. Title III is for English language learners. That's what the support is there for. You can use the funds for if you have instructional services. Maybe you don't have the resources within your district that you need to provide the EL, English language services. You can use the funds to purchase those. You can use it for teacher training. It is specified. Remember, we talked about at the very beginning, grants are meant to support specific groups of students. This is a perfect example of that. So this can only be used for English language learners aged 3 to 21. They have to have been born outside of the United States, and they had to have attended school in the United States for less than 3 years. So once they get outside of that criteria, they no longer fit within the Title III grant funding. And then Title IV is around student support and academic enrichment. Funds can be used for a myriad of things. I would say the top three kind of initiatives within it. I will say too, this has to be this money has to be used to supplement something. So you can't necessarily start something new. It has to supplement work that's already being done within your district. And so the three focus areas are, number one, a well-rounded education, thinking about STEM, art, music. How can you support what's happening within your district to continue the work there? The second area is around safe and healthy students, focusing on mental health. That's been really big over the last several years. Things like bullying prevention also fall under safe and healthy students. And then the last area under Title IV is effective use of technology. So making sure that we're providing students with digital literacy. So then this is just a regional comparison of title funds. So Germantown is listed at the top, and then the others are just in alphabetical order. So I tried to pull out like districts, close in size, close in area. So you can see that, I mean, there aren't too many, I would say, amounts that are not like out of the ordinary. All districts in this subset qualify for the minimum for Title IV. So I would say the key takeaways for title grants, when you think about our neighboring districts, your title allocations are very similar. And when you do see differences, because it is that formula based, those differences are really because of your student demographics and differences in enrollment. But again, most districts in that list are pretty close from an enrollment perspective. And so on this list, I mentioned that for that Title IV allocation, everyone on that receives the minimum. That's pretty standard for suburban districts in our area. They're pretty much all receiving that minimum Title IV allocation. And again, all formula based. So switching gears to IDEA. So the first one is flow through. And this was pointed out on the summary slide, but this is the largest federal special education grant. So thinking about Fund 27, this is the largest outside support that the district has coming in. And it really is all about supporting students with special needs. So you can fund your special education teachers with these dollars. You may have specialized services. It's focusing on instructional supports for students with disabilities. And again, this is based on your allocation is based on the enrollment within your district. And it is same as ELL. It's focusing on that age of students from 3 to age 21 for special education. For IDEA preschool, same thing, focusing on those special education services, but a much smaller subset. So this is servicing children ages 3 to 5 that have some type of disability. So if you thinking about your early childhood program that's supporting special education services, if there's early intervention supports that are needed, you can use your IDEA preschool entitlement for this. So really focusing on just still special education, but just a little bit smaller of a subset. And the same thing, here's a comparison. IDEA flow through is the first column, preschool is the second, all around the same amount for both areas.
Sarah, to clarify, this is based on enrollment of students who are identified with IEPs. So This isn't just districts get this dollar amount, but based on IEPs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a great segue to my next slide. So as mentioned, it is based on your special education counts. That's what drives the amount of money that you get. And Germantown's allocation really does kind of fall in the middle of this particular peer group comparison. Okay, and then switching gears, still in federal grants, but switching gears to career and technical education. So you do have the Perkins grant, and this is all about supporting career pathways and technical education. So there are many things that you can use the funds for. You can use it for equipment within your CTE classrooms. Maybe you have students that want to do some type of certification before they graduate. You could use that. You could have programs that are for career pathway development. And if you have any partnerships with local businesses, you can also use your Perkins grant money for that as well. And then just same districts, here's a regional comparison. So I would say, again, kind of right in the middle of other districts. And again, because it is federal and it is formula based, it is based on the participation in your CTE programs and then enrollment. The National School Lunch Program. So the National School Lunch Program, the goal of this program is to provide nutritionally balanced, low cost or no cost lunches to children each school day. It was established back in 1946, and it is this program is administered, and I'm having a hard time saying words now, administered federally by the USDA, so the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and then the money is passed to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, and then we receive funds through the DPI. So just a high level of how the National School Lunch Program funding works. So school districts receive reimbursement for each meal that is served based on student eligibility. And so you could have a student who is fully paid, or they could be reduced, or they could be completely free. And it is all based on their household income. These rates, the federal reimbursement rates, are adjusted annually, and they're based on inflation and food costs. So when we look at our federal reimbursement that we have right now, so a free lunch, you're getting reimbursed $4.16. The school district is. For a reduced price lunch, you're getting reimbursed $3.76. And for a paid lunch, you're being reimbursed 42 cents. So if your lunch price is $3 for a lunch, and it's a student that is that's fully paid lunch, you're getting reimbursed 42 cents of that $3. Why does the school lunch program matter? The National School Lunch Program matter. So it really all comes down to supporting student health and learning. So making sure that we give access to nutritious meals for students. It is said to help improve concentration and attendance. It reduces food insecurity. It maybe a student doesn't have access to a healthy meal for breakfast and dinner, at least they have access to a lunch. From a district operation perspective, it can help to offset food service costs. So you can, as an example, you could purchase, if you needed lunch tables, you could purchase lunch tables out of Fund 50 as opposed to purchasing them out of the general fund. So you're keeping your dollars in the classroom of general fund. Same thing with equipment. If you needed to buy a stove or
Warming tray.
you can purchase all of that out of Fund 50, and again keep that money in Fund 10 supporting classrooms. It supports all of the kitchen staffing. I mean, it really is meant to stabilize your nutrition program budgets. I thought this was a interesting note that across the U.S., millions of students participate daily, making the National School Lunch Program one of the largest federal education programs. All right, so state and local. The first one is educator effectiveness. And so educator effectiveness is a learning-centered continuous improvement system designed to improve the education of all students in the state of Wisconsin. And so when you think about the process of hiring a staff member, right, you first want to make sure that you have your ducks in a row so that you're able to attract those people or those teachers into your district, and then you want to recruit them. And then once you have them in your district, how are you going to develop them to ultimately retain them? So that's really what the Educator Effectiveness Program is all about. And it is focused on supporting guided, individualized, self-determined professional growth and development for teachers within the organization. And then the other one is the robotics grant. So the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction provides grant dollars on a per team basis. And this is for public, private, and charter schools. And it's focused on middle school and high school in particular. And they can use funds to register for competitions. They can cover kits, fees, travel, mentor stipends. It just really helps to support the program and keep it up and running. It's not a large dollar amount that districts typically get. I think Germantown's is $6,000 or maybe $4,400. Actually, I think the max is $6,000, but it does just help to keep the program up and running and give options for students. So in summary, grants really are in place to support very specific programs and student needs. Most grants are restrictive in nature and they have to be used for a designated purpose. While grant funding represents a small portion of district revenue, it is vitally important that you continue to be creative and strategic in the way that you utilize the funds, because like I mentioned, especially with special education, if you correctly utilize those funds, that can free up a lot of money in the area of your Fund 10 and operations account. Special education funding represents the largest grant category, which we talked about. Your grant allocations from the subset of districts that I pulled are pretty similar. And then grants really do a good job at helping expand opportunity for students. And that's why we're here. So with that, I will take any questions that you may have. Yeah.
Probably number one is we do not have this presentation in our finance committee material this evening. So I'm hoping we can get a PDF or whatever form and maybe put tonight's date on it and put it in the same folder with, under tonight's date.
Sure. It was provided to the committee via email on Friday when I sent the packet to the committee, but it was sent to me after my packet was due. So we will include it in the packet and put it on the website.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, I usually just go right to the website. So I guess I missed it in the email.
No, but a good point. There's a lot of great information here.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to lose it. I think I don't know how often we'll do these, probably not every year, but I wouldn't be opposed, if we did, maybe a little different take on it each time. But
Sure.
However often, Brittany is willing to entertain it, or Chris, certainly we could do it. But anyway, we don't want to lose the information, so it should be posted, with tonight's finance. The very spot that Russ was asking about earlier in finance, that anybody could find it easily. Yep. Thank you. I can't think of any questions other than going through vouchers. I noticed a few purchases for the robotics team, and so I went to the website for a company that supplies robot parts just to see what they all had for sale online. So I bookmarked it just for the heck of it. There's a lot of interesting things on their website, and I believe it. If you look at our webpage with regard to the robotics team, there's they mention STEM in there, so there's quite a bit of work and things for students to learn on the robotics team. So I'm happy to see it that there's a kind of a special grant for that in this material this evening. Otherwise, I can't think of any other questions myself. Anyone else on the board? You don't have to be in finance to ask. Yeah, Chris.
I would just reiterate Jake's point earlier and how we're utilizing title funds. Between him and Katie with our RDA funds, maybe it would be a good report in July at the end of the fiscal year on how we're maximizing federal dollars to offset from the general fund on programming, teacher development, and all those pieces. So that might be a future report to bring forward to the board.
I did think of one thing. I think Jake mentioned might have been a private school chose not to participate in Title I funds, maybe. Why is it they just don't want to deal with the paperwork? Is that they don't like Jake?
Jake might be able to add more to this, but sometimes it is the process that they have to go through. As stated, there's a lot of rules and guidelines and reporting that you have to do when you actually receive the dollars. So we do help them with it, but I think that going through some of the processes and coming up with what falls in the category that they can purchase, they would rather not go through the process.
Just leave it alone. I figured just because it's government related, it seems to come with a lot of paperwork. So I understand. Very good. Jake, I think we're good. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. And I think we have one more of these yet, right? Next month. So this was, okay. Yeah, this was number 4, I believe. Next month is number 5, and then that's it, correct?
So next month will be debt, and then she'll be back.
Who's doing debt? Are you doing that?
Bear,
Oh, Barrett is. Okay. Very good. So we have 2 more to go yet. Fantastic.
our favorite word, death, right?
Yeah. It's not my favorite word, but I get it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.